Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week our guests are the former mayor of New Orleans and Louisiana Lieutenant Governor Mitch Landrieu, and an expert on Nazi Germany and fascism in the early days, particularly Professor Benjamin Hett of Hunter College. Remember, we love taking your questions, so write to politicswarroom@gmail.com for next week's show, when I'm going to get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. You also can get text updates about what's next, Politicon and Politics War Room, by signing up at Politicon.com. Tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. And please check out the link to our sponsor, Miracle Made, in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting our sponsors because it helps make this podcast happen. Hey, James, you know, there is such a dark side to Trump. I know most Democrats couldn't stand Reagan. I didn't like some of his policy, but the contrast is remarkable. He usually was a sunny optimist. All Trump is a mean-spirited hater. He openly spewed hate at the MAGA celebration of Charlie Kirk last Sunday. Then his remarkable press conference with his pathetic HHS secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he told women, tough it out. If you have pain when you're pregnant, don't take Tylenol. It might cause autism. He had no basis for saying that. There's no scientific or medical evidence that Tylenol is going to cause autism with pregnant women. He's going to scare people, and he may even cost lives. Then he goes to the UN. I watched a lot of UN speeches, some good ones, some bad ones, but some mediocre ones. I've never seen anyone quite like this. It was kind of a combination of Captain Queeg and Dr. Strangelove. He told them, your countries are going to hell, and I'm the only one. I'm really good at this. I'm the only one that can save you. Then the escalator breaks down when he's coming in, and he blames it on the UN. It was actually his videographer. And the same with the teleprompter. James, I really think there's some cognitive issues here. I think Trump is even for Trump, this is beyond anything even semi-normal.
Well, we've been doing this, 8 years maybe, a long time. And we always begin the show, can you believe this? And of course, every time it's something else. And you'd have to go back up. Caduce to Axios and Mike Allen, and they did the kind of 15 most egregious things. And you can look at it. It's a good reference point in case you ever forget it.
It is.
I think what we should do is, did he tell the truth about anything? Okay, he spoke for an hour, maybe, let's just call it 58 minutes. Was there one accurate factual statement in the whole thing? Because if you say the lies he told, well, that's the whole thing. And you're just inundated in them. There should be a Trump truth watch just to see if he ever tells the truth. And then, oh my God, look what he just did. He actually said it was 3:06 in the afternoon. It was 3:06 in the afternoon.
James, do you want to make this a weekly or a monthly or an annual event?
Maybe some of our viewers, you can come in and they can point out in one of my letters, I heard him say this on this date at this time, and it was actually a fact. It was actually a fact. He said there were 50 states. Okay, I'll give him that. Okay, if he says the sun comes up in the east and sets in the west, that we're going to count that as truth. Our standard for truth is so goddamn low you can't believe it. I don't know if he's going to get anything in it.
You know, how great are Miracle's cool and clean sheets when you want to sleep your best? I can tell you this, James Carville says he can't imagine life without them. If you ever wake up sweaty, freezing, or just uncomfortable, just take it from my pal Carville. The temperature in your bedroom can make or break your sleep. That's why you need to switch to Miracle-Made sheets. They are inspired by NASA technology and use silver-infused temperature-regulating fabric to help you sleep perfectly all night long. Sleeping at the right temperature is a critical way to feel rested the next day, and Miracle Sheets truly give you maximum comfort in any weather. Better yet, they make pillowcases and comforters too. Plus, thanks to their antibacterial silver technology, Miracle Sheets require 3 times less laundry because they stay clean and fresh 3 times longer. It's great for your skin. Hidden bacteria can clog your pores and cause acne. So sleep clean with Miracle. Trust us, with no more gross odors and way less laundry, life is a whole lot better for your household. Join us in getting better sleep every night. Not only are Miracle sheets smooth, breathable, and ridiculously comfortable, they don't have the steep price tag of other luxury brands. Miracle sheets feel nicer than bed sheets used by some five-star hotels. So it's a vacation every time you get into bed. I not only imagine myself back in France, I was just back in France. And I want to tell you, I know what they mean when they say miracle sheets make you feel as good as a five-star hotel. And if James is at Oktoberfest rather, I think he's going to say the same thing. Your call. Drift off to dreamland and wake up at the perfect temperature every time you get into bed. Choose Miracle and upgrade your sleep, or give the gift of better rest. Go to trymiracle.com/warroom to try Miracle Made Sheets today. You'll save over 40%, and when you use promo code WARROOM, you'll get an extra 20% off plus a free 3-piece towel set. They make an amazing gift, and with a 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no risk. That's trymiracle.com/warroom, code WARROOM at checkout. Thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring this episode. The link is also in our show notes. James, our guest, is someone that you might be familiar with. Mitch Landrieu, former mayor of New Orleans, lieutenant governor of Louisiana, really critical White House aide, as smart a person on politics as anyone we know in America. Mitch, let me just start with what's going on right now here in Washington. The threat of a government shutdown, the Democrats insisting that before they vote for a funny bill, there has to be an extension of the Obamacare healthcare subsidies, which expire in December. Are the Democrats playing this right?
Well, the Democrats, what people in America want is somebody to use whatever power they have to fight back against decisions that are hurting people in America. And people are frustrated that people are not fighting hard enough. Now, Donald Trump, as you know, is the president. He's got the Supreme Court. He's got the House. He's got the Senate. This is his government. And I think what people are saying is that what he did, he's only done passed one bill, the big, beautiful, ugly bill, that essentially cut health care for millions of Americans, whether it's Medicaid and closing rural hospitals, or whether it's now the subsidies that used to be in place for under Obamacare. And he did that just for one simple reason, to give the wealthiest people in America a tax break that they do not need and many of them do not want. And so at some point in time, although I have very rarely ever said, go do what you got to do, stand in the breach and let the government shut down. We're at a point now where it's clear that Donald Trump is going to take everything he can from every American until he gets himself rich, seeks retribution against his enemies. And I just think they need to stand up to him, not for the sake of standing up to him, but for protecting Americans who are going to be hurt very, very badly. So I would encourage them to fight everywhere, anywhere, and all the time against the things that Donald Trump has done, because he will not stop. And I don't think that you can appease this guy.
Would you agree, Mitch, in this particular fight, though? I mean, there are all kinds of things Democrats are asking for, all of which I support, like, to restore the funding for public broadcasting, for foreign aid. But aren't they better off focusing just on health care, on the Obamacare subsidies, the cost?
Well, it's the best in my travels around the country, which I've done extensively in the last 3 months. I've been to 21 states. I've been through 61 meetings and focus groups. Working class people in America feel betrayed. They feel like Donald Trump said to them, I am going to cut your cost. I'm going to make your life easier. I'm going to make your life better. Now, he said a bunch of other stuff, like I'm going to settle the war in Ukraine overnight. I'm going to make Gaza, peaceful so I can have the Nobel Peace Prize. He did not do that. He's made us weaker overseas. But on the domestic front, he's also raised costs on everything. If you think about it, rent's gone up, mortgages have gone up, the price of cars have gone up, the price of groceries has gone up, bananas, everything you can count has gone up. And what's happening is, across America, working class folks are going, listen, I need people to stop talking about whatever they're going to talk about and focus on helping me raise my family. And this is true about women, men, black, white, brown folks, and they feel forsaken. But the thing they care about the most, besides housing, which is at the top of the list because they can't put a roof over their head and they're pissed off about it, is they cannot believe that even conservative Republicans are going to take their health care away. I can't tell you how many white guys who are MAGA conservative guys that I have talked to that cannot believe that the Republicans in Congress are going to make their lives harder by taking away their health care for their spouses and their kids, especially special needs kids. And James is smarter about this in politics, but I would focus on that issue because it is the most salient issue. It's the most immediate issue, and it's the one that is going to have the most harm on the most Americans in the shortest period of time. So, I'll let somebody else deal with the messaging, but I'd focus on that thing more than anything else.
I'm going to let James pick up on most of this, but this is hurricane season. Been lucky so far, but it's not over. Is this administration prepared for a major hurricane?
They're not only prepared, they have put us in the worst position the country's been in 50 years. Now, I don't mean to act like a know-it-all, but unfortunately, in this particular space, I know way more than I want to know about making sure that people need to be ready for bad things that are coming their way. As you know, I was a state representative, a lieutenant governor, a mayor. I lived through Katrina, Rita, Ike, Gustav, the national recession, the BP oil spill, and before that, I lived through Betsy, which was the last big storm back in the early 60s, and Camille. So I've had my ass busted and been in a boat getting out of water's way more times than I want. And this is important. In order for us to be prepared for bad things that are coming our way, and more bad things weather-wise are coming, more wildfires, more hurricanes, more tornadoes, we have to make sure that our emergency response systems in America and our ability to see bad things that are coming our way build so that we're strong when they come, be prepared to respond should something bad happen, and then the ability to rebuild is stronger, not weaker. And for some strange reason, this guy and his people have decided to basically cut out from underneath us the ability on the federal, state, and local level to respond better, and they've made it harder. So I'm very, very obviously sensitive about it. I live in the city of New Orleans. There's a hurricane that comes every week now, and if one of these things should morph into a Cat 4 or a Cat 5, and you can't see it coming, here cut to Noah. Here taking airplane hunter planes out of the air so that we can't see flood warnings that aren't there anymore so that there are floods in Texas. This is a life and death situation for all Americans, whether they are red or blue or white or black or green, whatever the hell it is. And we are in a much worse position today than we were 8 months ago to push stuff like this back.
Look, the Democratic Party has differences. They always have. They always will. But when I see groups like a group headed by Adam Jendelson, a guy I like, used to be a Harry Reid aide, they are now going to try to raise lots of money, over $10 million, to take on the woke left of the Democratic Party. I don't like the woke left in the Democratic Party, but God damn it, there's an existential threat right now. And if you're a Democrat like Adam Jendelson, you ought to be raising money for the midterms to take on that existential threat. Then you can fight the intra-party battles later. Am I crazy?
No, you're completely correct. I mean, circular firing squads don't work.
Yeah.
Again, I know that everybody's entitled to their opinion. Everybody's entitled to their emotion. But to my dear friend James, who he and I share this, winning is everything. If you don't win, you can't have power. And if you don't have power, you can't make anything happen. So I'm not telling people not to feel how they feel. All I'm saying is if you want a chance to really address that issue, it's better when you're in power than when you're out of power. So stay focused on the thing that is going to help you get what you need to get where you want, which is essentially the first order of business. Win in Virginia, win in New Jersey, recruit great candidates, win the midterms, then we've got a fighting chance. If we spend this time fighting ourselves, in a way that makes us look weak or uncertain or unsure, it's not a way to win the election. You may get somebody to agree with you that you are right, but being right is not nearly as important, in the long term as winning, so that you actually have the power to form better policies that improve American citizens' lives. So I would encourage people to, stay under the tent, make sure the tent's big, be open, and then work towards winning first, and we'll settle all those differences later.
Well, I think the Democrats deserve, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris deserve blame for not putting winning first back in 2024. There's no way in the world he should have run. He should have gotten out a year earlier. And when she picked Tim Walz, a perfectly nice man, she said Josh Shapiro was too ambitious. He wanted to be involved in everything. Well, God damn it, Jack Kennedy picked Lyndon Johnson, who was more ambitious than Josh Shapiro could ever hope to be, for one reason: to win. I mean, what happened to Democrats, Mitch?
Well, listen, let me tell you something. We can spend a lot of time, trying to figure out what happened in the past. I'm really not the least bit interested in it. I'll let history deal with that. What I'm clear about, in case you haven't seen it, you should go watch the President of the United States address to the United Nations yesterday.
I
All
did.
right, that is a amazingly Looney Tunes speech that if anybody else in the world gave, they would wrap them up and take them away and see if they needed treatment. Now, all people can keep arguing about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris or what happened in the past. I am singularly focused on making sure that every American understands that Donald Trump has betrayed them, that he said that he needed to run for office because he alone can do it. And you know what? He was going to reduce your cost. That's what he said.
Right.
And since that time, everything is going up that you want to go down, and everything that you want to go down is going up. And so it's upside down, it's backwards. He's living in a myth in his own mind that he has created. And I think Americans really have to kind of take stock of themselves. And while they're thinking about bread and butter issues, which, by the way, is what they're most concerned about, it is also true that the assault on democracy has gotten clearer, more precise, and impossible for Donald Trump and his team to defend, just like they did when they were trying to eviscerate free speech in America. If you don't have free speech, if you don't have the right to redress your grievances against the government, if you don't have the ability to criticize people like Mitch Landrieu because you don't like the way I look, or you don't like my hair, or you don't like my opinion about something, then America loses one of the fundamental pillars of what makes her strong and what makes her great. So we've got two things going on at once. And I would just laser-like stay focused on message, because this is where your people are. And what they're telling you, Democrats, is pay attention to my needs and to what I care about. And look, I'll say it very simply. I go to Tasty Donuts, which is a little donut shop on Broad and Esplanade in New Orleans, where regular folks eat and live every morning. When I go in there and I talk to them about big stuff, and then I get into the democracy thing, they say, hey, Mitch, while you're saving democracy, do me a favor, save me a couple of bucks in my pocket because I can't make my rent.
Yeah.
You have to understand that. And they want people to quit bullshitting them and just to speak common language, real simple. It's not because they can't understand. They think you don't understand. So quit using big words. Just talk real simple. Like, people have great common sense. They're intuitive. They're smart. And what they care about is what they want you to care about. And if you don't, they're going to go down the road and be for somebody else.
Mitch, I promise you I will never criticize your hair.
Thank you. I happen to like it.
Talk about the approach Gavin Newsom is taking. He is really going out front. He's even making fun of Trump, as well as criticizing him. Is that workable?
I love it. I think you do more of it. Listen, here's the thing. I don't think you know what's going to work. And quit listening to experts tell you what you think's going to work. Just go try it. Actually, Donald Trump's not bad at this. He'll go out into an audience and he'll throw out a bunch of stuff. And if it works, he'll keep doing it. You never know what's going to register with the audience. I know this, though, is that if you try to appease a bully, they will take your lunch money from you. And I am absolutely clear about this with Donald Trump. This guy is amoral. Now, I want people to understand what I just said. I didn't say he was immoral, and I didn't say he was moral. What I said was he's amoral, meaning like he doesn't have a conscience about whether something is right or wrong. Just does not. And his view of the world is that I am strong and I can take what I want, and I will take it from you unless you stop me. Now, you will notice that people who stop him get his respect. He actually says, oh, that guy's pretty tough. Oh, Wes Moore's a big guy. Oh, Wes Moore, whatever. That's all he respects. And so this is like, people get upset about this. This is just his rule. If I can take it from you, I'm going to take it from you. And I'm not going to let my conscience be my guide, because I believe everything is mine. So things should be clear to really people. Donald Trump cares about power. He cares about making money, and he cares about retribution. That's all he cares about. Whatever issue comes up about whether you're for tariffs or against tariffs, or for choice or against choice, whatever issue helps him get power, seek retribution, and make money is the thing that he's going to do. And so I would just encourage everybody to try everything to stop him, because when he's finished, all he cares about is himself. He does not care about the country. He doesn't care about the people that voted for him. And when people in America wake up to that and find out that they've been betrayed, and Democrats give them an alternative, My guess is we're going to do better than worse. So I'm all for Gavin. Let Gavin do whatever he's doing. He's getting under Trump's skin. I love to see that. If someone else thinks there's a more elegant way to solve the problem, have it that too, and let everybody try and see if we can get a little bit further along than we have.
Well, you're so right about standing up to bullies. Those who have those 4 law firms, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Harvard, a few others, they win. They not only stand up, but eventually he's going to back down. But too few have not realized that and have capitulated.
Al, let me say this without being judgmental. This is being observational. Dr. King, when he was in the Birmingham jail, wrote a letter. It's called The Letter from the Birmingham Jail.
Right.
Everybody in America should go read it. And in that letter that he says, I had plenty of time to write, he doesn't condemn the Ku Klux Klan first. He doesn't say, because he says, I know where they are. He goes, the people that I am most upset about is the milquetoast moderates or the business leaders who were too afraid to say anything because they were afraid they were going to lose and put themselves first before the rest of the country. And it makes me want to weep. It really makes me just want to cry that universities, law firms, these media companies have taken a knee to somebody who is misusing the office, the most incredible office in the world, the president of the United States, who's supposed to be used to help Americans. In exchange, he's used it to help himself. And I just think people have to stop giving in to him, because what they need to understand is that if he's coming for me now, he's going to come for you later. That's why free speech is so important. And that is why my fellow progressives on the left who tend to shut people down, what they used to call cancer culture. When you're protecting somebody's right to speak who is completely different from you, let's put Charlie Kirk's name in here. If you didn't like what he said, and I didn't in many instances, but you still have to defend his right to say it, because if he loses his right, you lose your right to. You see, because that's how democracy works. The whole point of America is to have a country where people of different races, creeds, colors, and ideas can peacefully coexist. And the only way that happens, this beautiful thing we call pluralism, is to give each other room to, in fact, criticize people precisely because they disagree with you, right? And you protect them because they disagree with you, because if you don't have that right, they're not going to have it either.
Well, that's so eloquently put. I think we've lost our European correspondent, Mr. Carville, but I can't thank you enough, Mitch. You have been a terrific guest, and you'll have to come back sometime when we have James in the States.
Happy to do it.
We have a great guest, a very timely guest. He's Benjamin Hett, a professor of history at Hunter College, foremost scholar on the rise of Nazi Germany, author of half dozen books, including The Death of Democracy and The Nazi Menace. Professor Hett, the Nazis in 1932 won the most seats in the parliament, but they were a distinct minority. They had, I think, 4 leaders in the past 3 or 4 years. Hitler demands that there be a coalition, that he be the chancellor, but he came in looking pretty weak. He didn't have much in the Reichstag, and others kind of calculated. And you make this point that, okay, well, we don't like him, he's a menace, but we'll give it to him. We can control him, and he might even be a short-termer. Yet within several months, he enacts the Enabling Act. He starts to dismantle democracy, and he's well on the way to becoming the dictator that he was. How did it happen? What lessons are there?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Your characterization is absolutely right. Really, the story of German politics for a few years before Hitler came to power was there was kind of this dance going on where Hitler was increasingly winning over a substantial electoral following, not a majority, but by 1932, about a third of the German electorate, which made his party, the Nazi Party, the biggest party in the national parliament, the Reichstag. But under the German constitution, to get into real power, he had to have the doors open to him, specifically by the Reich president, who was the World War I Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg, and kind of in a less formal way, the circle around Hindenburg, which basically represented traditional German elites, especially the military and big business. And so Hitler had to sort of win their favor if he was going to get named chancellor and get into a position of power. And this is where it got kind of interesting, because these, you might say, kind of traditional establishment conservatives looked at Hitler and his party, and they thought a sort of rabble. They didn't think much of Hitler. He had never risen above the rank of private first class in the First World War, and these guys, if they were military, they were senior officers. And he didn't speak very grammatically, even in his mother tongue of German. He was very crude, and his party looked crude. But they did have some advantages. The electoral following was a big advantage, and the fact that they were clearly anti-communist, they were clearly highly nationalist, they were clearly pro-military. All of these things commended themselves to the traditional elites, and so they thought, well, maybe we can manipulate him, maybe we can use him, as you suggested. They underestimated Hitler and thought they could control him. And eventually, like German politics, as I said, for several years was kind of a dance between these two sides, each trying to use the other. This eventually got consummated in a bargain in late January 1933, which brought Hitler to power as the chancellor with President von Hindenburg's approval into a coalition with establishment conservatives, in which of the 11 men in the cabinet, only 3, including Hitler, were Nazis. So it looked originally like a weak political position in which the traditional elites sort of had him under control, had co-opted his electoral following, and had gotten what they wanted. And of course, that turned out not to be the case.
One of the reasons it didn't was he was able to sabotage the legal system and the media. Am I correct? And he did that rather quickly. And, just tell us how I think about that today. So tell us how he did it.
Yeah, it did happen incredibly quickly. Within about 2 months, he was effectively a dictator. Right away, when his administration came into office, they started passing decrees, sort of equivalent to executive orders in the American system, which started to crack down on press freedom. They started to bring a lot of their own people into the police. There's a kind of ICE equivalent here, I think. They were starting to bring literally the Nazi stormtroopers. They were making them auxiliary police officers so they could pursue their political enemies with the authority of the police. So they are cracking down on the media. They're cracking down on free expression. There was an election campaign underway in the month of February, and the Nazis used their now control of the police often to break up speeches and rallies by oppositional parties. And then the really key moment here came on the 27th of February, when Hitler had been in office for exactly 4 weeks, and the famous incident of the Reichstag fire occurred, which is to say, somebody set a fire in Germany's parliament, the Reichstag. It destroyed the plenary chamber at the heart of the building, didn't really damage the main structure of the building, but it did knock out the chamber. And right away, Hitler said, it was the communists who did this. Therefore, we need another emergency decree to crack down on them, which he got. President von Hindenburg signed. And that decree was very important. It allowed, first of all, Hitler to pull all of the individual rights out of the Constitution. So freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom from arbitrary arrest, confidentiality of the post, all that kind of stuff was now gone.
So that's how he got the press.
That's how he got the media. That's how he completed the process. And that, at that point, Germans really have no rights. Very importantly, and sometimes overlooked, is that the second part of the decree said that his national government, Germany is a federal system then and now, like the United States, and Hitler was running essentially the federal government, but the decree gave him the power, his government, the power to take over the state governments if he deemed them not fulfilling their requirements to maintain order. So that also helped him consolidate his dictatorship, because he made very thorough use of this and took over state governments that were somewhat oppositional, particularly the state government of the state of Bavaria. The Reichstag fire is controversial to this day. The question is who actually said it. It's a lot like the John F. Kennedy assassination, in the sense that there was a crazy guy who was running around by himself in the building who was arrested for the fire and clearly had something to do with it, kind of Lee Harvey Oswald in this scenario. And this crazy guy, a Dutch journeyman stonemason, insisted that he had set the fire by himself. No one in 1933 believed him. Hitler said it was the communists. People who were anti-Nazi said, obviously, this was a Nazi false flag operation, precisely so they could get this decree and blame the communists. And the controversy persists. Nowadays, no one thinks it was the communists, but there is still argument among historians. Did Marinus van der Lubbe, the crazy Dutch guy, act alone, or was he a stooge in a Nazi conspiracy? I have entered into this controversy, and I have argued that and there is evidence that has come to light in recent years, which does point to this being a Nazi conspiracy, making use of van der Lubbe. But the question does remain quite hotly debated.
Well, let me talk for a minute about the business leaders. The business leaders basically went along with Hitler because they thought that they could control him, he would protect them. How long did it take him to realize what a tragic miscalculation that was?
I think some of them probably never realized it. Some of them maybe after the fact thought it was a nice idea that had gone badly. Some realized it pretty much right away. So there was a considerable range. There were also kind of interesting patterns as to what industries were more likely to favor the Nazis than others. And there's a certain logic to it. Industries that had high labor needs and therefore for whom unions were a significant issue, they were much more likely to back Hitler because they were correctly confident that he would crush labor unions. Businesses that were more export oriented and a bit more oriented to the world were correspondingly much less enthusiastic about Hitler. Business on the whole didn't back Hitler until he was in power. They had their own political party, basically, called the German People's Party, which, despite the name, was really a big business party. And that's really what they backed prior to Hitler coming to power. But once he became chancellor and there was that last election campaign in February and March 1933, Hitler was very upfront about getting money from them. There's an account of a famous kind of fundraising meeting where Hitler gives a speech and then his right-hand man, Hermann Goering, says to the assembled business leaders, "Now, gentlemen, to the cash register." And they're supposed to pony up, and they did.
That sounds rather familiar, but we'll get to that in just a minute. We're talking about Germany in 1933. I'm going to come back to that, but it's really talking about the way authoritarianism develops. I saw an interview the other day with Garry Kasparov, the great Russian chess champion, who noted that in the early Putin years, he gave business leaders, the oligarchs, big tax cuts and protections, and they all said, "Well, okay, he's going to follow in the in the footsteps of Boris, that he'll be okay." And only later did they realize they were ceding all power to him. It's different, but it's similar to what happened in Germany.
It is similar, I think. I don't claim to be an expert on Russia, but I think one difference is the process went much more slowly. Business
Right.
leaders found out pretty early on who the boss actually was. I think actually in some ways, some of our American business leaders who backed Trump rather enthusiastically last year may be coming to almost as quick a realization as to who the boss actually is now. Somewhat similar things happened in Germany. So for instance, German steel makers started getting into conflict pretty early on with Hitler because Hitler wanted to build up the armed forces as quickly as possible. He needed a lot of steel for that. He didn't want to export any steel. They preferred to export their steel. They also preferred to get iron ore imported from Sweden because it was better quality than what they could mine in Germany. Hitler didn't want to import things from Sweden because that would then necessitate exports, and it would get in the way of, as he thought, making as much steel as possible for as many tanks as possible, as quickly as possible. And when some of the steel makers tried to resist him on this, he basically said, "Okay, fine, I'm starting my own steel company." And he basically did. He started a state-run steel concern to sort of do an end run around the steel makers.
Well, we're getting to the crux of the conversation now. What parallels do you see between what occurred in Germany? I'm talking about 1933, which you've written so persuasively about. And this was before the Holocaust. They were, anti-Jewish things going on, but people weren't being sent to death chambers yet. But 1933, what parallels to what's happening in America today?
So there are some, and then I think there also are some important differences. So the parallels, among the more striking, I think, uh, for instance, the way Doge, we seem to be hearing less about this recently, but in the first few months, the way Doge was going into government agencies and so on and departments and firing people, and there seemed to be kind of a loyalty test at work. There's a fairly close parallel there. One of the first things Hitler's government did is introduce a law with a very long name, which was called the Law for the Reform of the Professional Civil Service. under which a lot of people working for the government were fired. They were basically fired if they were deemed to be Jewish or if they were deemed to be politically unreliable, with the agenda of getting very secure control by Hitler and his government over the whole government apparatus. So I think that is a bit of a parallel. I think in a rough way, ICE and the way ICE has been used and the way it is being expanded, as I was saying earlier, is a bit of a parallel to how the Nazis brought their own people into the police and then used them against political opponents. We may be just sort of navigating this right now, but I think there are parallels, as you were suggesting a few moments ago, in terms of the way Hitler quickly got control of the media. Trump obviously is trying to do this as well, although so far I think he's happily failing. But, when Trump said the other day that any broadcaster whose programs criticize him should lose their license, that is so unambiguously authoritarian. There's no other way to think about that. I think that might be the most absolutely unambiguously authoritarian thing he has said or done since coming back into office in January. And that certainly raises alarming parallels.
Well, the Nazis were anti-immigrant, they were protectionist, they were nationalistic, and they professed to be populist. That does have a striking feel to it, doesn't it?
It certainly does. All of those things are parallels, and indeed, one of the things I argued in my book, The Death of Democracy. Well, in the book, I was not making any explicit parallels, but I did point out that the thing the Nazis were successful on in free elections, when they had to fight free elections, was really a kind of nationalist pitch against economic globalization. No one used the word globalization back in 1932 or 1933, but that's really what they were talking about.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about. Hitler, I mean, amazingly, Hitler has a very interesting passage in what is simply called his second book from 1928, in which he complains about German companies outsourcing jobs to China, which is a very interesting thing to say in 1928. And the Nazis were positioning themselves against that kind of thing. You're right, too, that they were certainly anti-immigrant. One of the lesser known features of politics in Germany in the years just before the Nazi takeover is that border security and migration were actually very big and very emotional issues. Germany had a new border with Poland at that time because Poland had just come into existence after World War I, and Germany didn't have the police or military manpower to control migration flows across that border. And the Nazis made a lot of political hay out of this, that there's this unsecured border. The quote unquote weak democracy can't control it. And there were a lot of refugees. There were hundreds of thousands of refugees at that time pouring in across that border, basically because of the Russian Revolution and other bits of turbulence going on to the east of Germany. So that was a very big issue in Weimar politics. And in a certain way, I mean, you're absolutely right. The Nazis did, although again, they didn't really use the word, but they did position themselves as something we would consider to be populist. They positioned themselves as anti-elite. They positioned themselves as the real spokespeople for the real German people. Much of their rhetoric, not their practice, but their rhetoric was anti-big business and anti-capitalist to a degree, which for them also mixed in with the anti-Semitism. Although interestingly, the closer the Nazis got to power, the less overt they were about their anti-Semitism, because they knew that was not going to really be an election winning issue for them in terms of winning people over to them that were not already core supporters of them.
And they also were helped by the lack of a coherent or a coordinated opposition, weren't they?
Yes, that's absolutely right. Partisan divides in Germany before 1933 were absolutely as fierce and rigid, if not more fierce and rigid, as what we experience right now, with the added element that there were about 7 or 8 significant parties all competing for power or competing to be part of a coalition, and they kind of all hated each other. In particular, the 2 parties of the left that might have been the most important force to stop the Nazis, that being the Social Democrats, which were center left, and the Communists, which of course were far left, they hated each other far more, I think, than either of those parties hated anybody on the right. And they had a long history of mutual hatred and violence and division. And by the way, Russian influence was a factor here too, because in those days, the regime in Moscow, Joseph Stalin's dictatorship, was basically the boss of all world communist parties and gave orders to all world communist parties. And Stalin had ordered the German communists not to make any coalition to stop the Nazis, because Stalin thought it would be good for communism if the Nazis came to power, because that would then stimulate a final communist revolution. So if
because
the
he'd
communist,
be so bad. He too
yeah,
underestimated Hitler, right?
he absolutely did. And so the communists and the social democrats, if they could have worked together, that could have been a force that might have stopped the Nazis. But for all of these reasons, their divisions and the Russian influence, they couldn't. None of the other parties by that point were either large enough in support base or able to unify enough to form any kind of effective coalition to stop the Nazis.
Benjamin, let me ask you one final question. The big lie. That was central to what the Nazis did. Goebbels, Hitler, you tell the big lie, you keep telling it, you never back down from it, and the bigger the lie in some ways, the better. Again, there are similarities to what we're seeing here today.
Yes, in a way, Hitler and Goebbels, his kind of right-hand man and propagandist, they were very forward-looking, and they were really, I think, pioneers of a certain kind of disinformation politics and very calculated use of dishonesty. I mean, as you say, Hitler wrote very explicitly in Mein Kampf, in his famous sort of autobiography, that there's no point in telling small lies in politics because people will see through those, because everybody tells small lies. So to be a successful politician, you tell absolutely massive lies. On the scale of, the big lie in the 1920s was we actually won World War I. I mean, the Germans on the right like to circulate the idea that they hadn't actually been militarily defeated by the Allies in World War I. Germany had been betrayed by democratic politicians at home. And Hitler circulated this story. I think they were all smart enough to know it was completely untrue, but it was also electorally effective to make an anti-Western Allies argument. And Hitler stressed the fact that if you just keep telling this lie, and it's a big enough lie, no one will believe that you would tell such a big lie. And even if it gets debunked, and here too, he was very clever about this, even if the lie gets debunked in public, fragments of it will remain, and somehow people will still kind of believe it. So you might as well go out there and tell massive lies. And Hitler and Goebbels and their people did so, and they did so very politically successfully.
Benjamin, I teach a course up at the University of Pennsylvania on press and politics, and one of the things I show my class is Triumph of the Will, which I think even 90 years later is as good a propaganda film as I have ever seen. I mean, she may have been a bad person, whether she was a Nazi or not, we can debate, but she certainly was a brilliant filmmaker.
Yeah, Leni Riefenstahl, she was a very skillful documentary filmmaker. She was a terrible person. I think we can take that to the bank.
Yeah.
I have to say, as a historian, I actually often wish I could watch that film and watch the clips of Hitler and really understand how people saw him as charismatic, because we know that many Germans did.
Yeah, and he doesn't look charismatic.
No,
he doesn't
to
talk
me, he looks like
he
looks like a ranting little twerp. But I think I would be a better historian if I could understand why people saw that as charismatic. I don't. John F. Kennedy or Churchill, yeah, I'm down with that. But Hitler, I don't get it.
FDR, yes, absolutely.
FDR, yeah.
Right. Well, listen, this has been a wonderful conversation. You've written 6 books, I think, but everybody out there, get Death to Democracy, Nazi Menace. They are 2 books that will teach you a great deal about an important part of history and maybe even make you think more about today. So, Ben Hett, thank you for being a great guest.
Thank you very much.
We are 100% advocates of free speech, and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are free to say anything they want. But what they're saying is an embarrassment. They often seem clueless about what happened last year. Biden supporters say that if he had stayed on the ballot, he would have won. No one else believes that. Moreover, if he had gotten out more sooner and been more not worried about everything else, his own wife said he was too tightly scheduled and he needed more rest in 24. How in the hell did she and others expect he to last 4 more years as president of the United States? Harris says if I had more time, I might have won. She was ahead a month out, and then she steadily lost ground. She didn't pick a very good running mate like Josh Shapiro because he was too ambitious and wanted to be involved in everything. That should be the role of a vice president, as my dear friend, the late Dick Moe, outlined for Carter and Mondale years ago. Jack Kennedy picked LBJ, who was more ambitious than Josh Shapiro, because the most important thing was to win. Harris had a chance to break with some policies, starting with her convention speech, break with some Biden policies. She blew it. I don't believe Donald Trump's 2024 election was a sure thing. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris made it so. Okay, now for our questions, which is going to be hard for me to handle without James, as it's hard for me to handle anything without James, but I assure you he's going to be with us next week. Jonathan in Winchester, Tennessee says, should Democrats in the Senate demand full release of the Epstein files in exchange for passing the budget? No, absolutely no. They should stay on budget matters. They have a good issue in extending the Obamacare health care subsidies. If they aren't extended, 3.3 million people will lose health care. Premiums will go up by 75% for others. It's a cost of living and a health care issue, and it's a winning issue. Don't get confused with things like the Epstein files. But good question, Jonathan. Marty in Del Mar, California says, can we create a coalition of Democratic crime-fighting mayors? I want you to go back, Marty. I hope you did, and listen to last week's show to David Harris and David Kennedy, because there is a coalition of crime-fighting mayors, and you know what? It's working. What's not working is sending in the National Guard and federal troops. And what's not working is the Trump administration cutting some of these community-based anti-violence efforts that these mayors and these police chiefs have used to reduce crime. Doug in Lexington, Kentucky. I dare you, Doug says, to come up with one problem that Trump caused and he owns up to. Doug, I can come up with, how long do we have? I mean, do we have years? I can come up with all sorts of problems that Trump caused. You ought to look at the Axios list of 15 severe problems he caused. I can't come up with one that he owns up to. I think I mentioned I went to Normandy last week, and General Eisenhower wrote the note the night before saying that if the mission failed, the fault was his alone. Oh, Trump would consider him a loser, a sucker. Jim in Nashville, Tennessee says, how do Democrats retake the narrative? The first thing you do, Jim, is you win the 26th election. If you don't win the midterms, you're in sorry shape. Then you start to formulate an agenda and candidates for 2028. And I guess the final question I'll ask here is from Luke in Boston, who says, well, what do you think happens to campaign funding in the upcoming election cycles? He says corporate money is going more to conservatives and Republicans. The Democrats have to up their game on fundraising. There's no question. The DNC is a disaster. I think the other committees are doing better. And some of those Democrats are sitting on their hands. They're upset about what happened in 2024. Well, they ought to be upset about what happened in 2024. But I note that Republicans in 2021, who had every reason to be upset too, didn't sit on their hands. They funded all sorts of groups, whether it was political groups or groups like the Heritage Foundation. So, Luke, you ask a good question, but tell those Democrats with deep pockets it's time to reach inside them. We'll be back with another set of questions next week. Now, if we didn't get to yours this week, don't worry, send it again, and we'll try to get to it next week. Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. As always, send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you check out the link to our sponsor, Miracle Made, in our episode show notes. We deeply thank you for supporting them, because when you do, it helps make this podcast happen. Now, to keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And check out our Substack at politicswarroom.com, as James and I are constantly adding new content. Go take a look. You can also find other shows you might enjoy on the Politicon YouTube channel, or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. And please remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review, because we'll be back next week with another program as we continue our War Room planning.